Very warm welcome here in the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung. It's so good to have all of you here. A very warm welcome also to our guest this evening, Li Anderson. I guess the applause is good. I'm very happy to be here now with Li Anderson. I guess many of you know already who Li is. We will speak also about what Li is doing politically in the next half an hour to 40 minutes before we open the floor. I just introduce you very briefly. Li is many things in the moment. She is a member of the European Parliament for the Left Party in Finland. The Left Party was doing very well in the European elections. You got, I guess, 73%. This was also something which was like a personal victory for you because you were the main candidate. You were for 8 years the chairperson of the Left Party in Finland. You were leading the party through a lot of complicated situation. The war, you were in the government as a minister of education in the moment also where the war in Ukraine started, and Finland with a long border to Russia was in a complicated situation and under pressure. Due to that situation, we will probably also speak a little bit about it. Now you're working as a chairperson in one of the most important committees in the European Parliament, the one on employment and social affairs. We hopefully also will speak about that a little bit. And you can add a lot of things to your biography I did not mention, but I don't want to make it too long. I'm Johanna Bussemer. I'm the deputy head of the Center for International Dialogue here in Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. We thought, okay, we really also want to bring voices from all over Europe. And we all were asking ourselves the question, how can the left win? Because we saw that there are some left parties doing very well, like yours did in the European elections, also in the current polls. In the local elections, you are facing the Finnish left parties around 9 to 10%. It's a little bit the same in Sweden. In the moment for the Venstre party, there are also other parties doing very well. It worked a bit. That the far right could not really succeed. You know, their successes in the Nordic countries. And so I want, and this would be my first question to you. You have to turn on your microphone. So what do you think? Maybe you can explore a little bit what happened last year in Finland, maybe also in some of the other Nordic countries. What were the circumstances why you did so well in the elections? And maybe we can speak about a little bit later what comes here in Germany, probably when we have 17%. No, but when we are hopefully doing a bit better than in the past.
Well, thank you. And firstly, thank you very much for the invitation. And I have to say that it's really nice to be here. I think this probably goes for all the other international guests as well that have noticed the optimism, like really the good feeling. I understand that the overall situation in Germany worries you and it worries me. But looking just at the left and the campaign, I think there is an amazing energy and optimism in that, which is really important because sometimes you might create this positive spiral in your election campaigns that feeds more good, and hopefully it will carry you to a great election result. I really hope so, because it matters for all of Europe how the left is doing in a country the size of Germany. So the results have implications far outside the borders of Germany. Going back to the European election, I think I would talk about Finland and Sweden because I think there were quite similar reasons for the results in both countries. At the time of the European election, there were only 2 countries in the EU where the far right was in power, Italy and Finland. Sweden was a part of the same club in a way because in Sweden the far right is the official supporting party of the government. So they don't have the minister post, but they are in practice a part of the governing coalition. And what makes the Finnish situation so interesting is that for the rest of Europe, the extreme right and the far right still has the luxury of presenting themselves as some kind of alternative to everything else. That's how they campaign, that's how they position themselves. Sometimes it's a cost of living, sometimes it's something else. But they still have the kind of luxury of people not knowing what they actually do if they get power. But in Finland, the voters had seen it. And in Sweden, the voters had seen what these parties actually do when they are entered into government, when they get power. I mean, that's why they are part of the parliamentary system, right? That's why voters vote for them to do something. And what they did in Finland was the most harsh austerity program Finland has experienced I would say ever in a very long time, with very severe cuts to social security, especially social benefits directed at workers with low income, so people with low wages, children and families with low income, unemployed persons and persons that are unemployed because they are sick. In addition to that, they have done very harsh cuts in the financing, of course, for the cultural sector, for the social and healthcare. They are now attacking the public broadcasting company that has seen the biggest firing of journalists any media company, public or private, has ever seen in the history of Finland. And also extremely hard attacks on workers' rights and trade unions, which I think is important to stress and emphasize, since this is really a feature traditionally of the fascist movements, to attack the trade unions, to attack the collective institutions that workers need to be able to fight for fair wages and fair working conditions. So, for example, passing law restricting the right to strike, passing law which binds the hands of the mediator in terms of giving, this is a bit technical, but giving kind of compromise suggestions for wage deals, especially affecting the public sector workers, so they could not get higher pay rises than the private sector. And also enacting changes into the Finnish labor market model that really means Finland is stepping away from the Nordic, traditionally seen as the Nordic labor market model, into a more into the direction that is more familiar from the Eastern European countries. And what we said that the European election was about, it was about, of course, a vote against the policies of the government, against the policies you get when the far right and the traditional right cooperates. And that was exactly what was at stake on a European level in the European election. Because the big question in the European election was whether or not there will be formed new coalitions in the European Parliament that would mean a similar cooperation between the far right and the traditional right wing on a European level that we had already seen in Finland and Sweden, and in a way, you could say in Italy. The other reason I want to point out is also actually the work that has been done within the left, I would say in the Nordic countries, that I would say has made the left like really working for a modern red-green alternative that at least according to the data that we have has made the left party more attractive for a larger number of voters than before. Saying that we are not afraid of being in power if there is a coalition where we think we can govern in a reasonable way, enacting our policies, but we do not want to be in opposition forever and always. Being very, I think, ambitious when we talk about economic justice and social justice, but also combining that with ambitious policies in terms of the climate and environment. And also being very consequent when talking about international law and foreign relations. So I think one combining theme for Sweden and Finland for the left parties has also been very firm stand both in solidarity with the people in Palestine and with the people in Ukraine. And these also are topics that are highly important for the voters in our country. So I think in the European election, the left managed to realize a potential that has been there and growing, but has not been realized to the same extent, at least not in the national parliamentary election, where usually there's some annoying social democrats saying that everybody should vote for them so that they can become prime ministers.
So now you are in the European Parliament, and as I said before, you have been in the government of Finland. We maybe come back to that. What your most important task there were as a Minister for Education. So can you explain a little bit how you think that you can transfer this policy approaches of the left in the work in the European Parliament? I guess very often, and it's the same, even we here as experts for European politics, sometimes you say like, oh, it's complicated to understand, or how can we really work through the Parliament and do interventions. There were also in the group of the left where you are working in, there are like different parties, but there's also like a lot of common ground, of course, because you are in the same group. So can you explore that a little bit for us?
I think I will give a long answer to this question because I think you have to context also when you talk about the European Parliament in this mandate. I really feel that Europe is at a crossroads now. This is like a defining point in the history of the European Union, the history of Europe in many ways. And what will happen in the European Parliament, in European politics in the coming years, I think we're at a point where Europe is actually kind of choosing the direction of Europe in a situation where we are seeing this authoritarian extreme right based on using violence against, people and minorities, but also other countries, growing in both in the West and in the East. Of course, represented by Donald Trump in the US and Putin in Russia. When I think about the people that vote for the left and the alternative that we want to represent, I feel that there are so many people looking at Europe now with the expectation of Europe stepping up to show that there is another way than this authoritarian fascism, I would say. That there is a possibility for Europe to create a role in for itself in this global economy as a kind of voice and a force. For example, if we talk about the digital economy, for another type of business model than these monopolized huge companies that you see in the US and in China, to be a voice in the global order for international law and human rights, for ambitious climate and environmental policies. I think within the left, I see people expressing expectations for Europe to choose this path. And I think if you look at the left, that is what we work for. And I think now actually it's more important than ever also for the left to try and form alliances with the groups that we can work with in trying to make sure that we would create a majority for this path. Do we have it? Not yet, because the situation in the European Parliament in this mandate is actually because the election results of Europe on the general level were not the same as in the Nordic countries. So what happened was that there is an alternative majority in the European Parliament. If the EPP, the conservative right wing, votes together with all of the extreme right, not only the ECR that likes to call itself, far right, not extreme, but really all of the three groups. So that is Meloni's ECR, it is the French Rassemblement National, the Patriots, and AFD in the ESN. All of them together form an alternative majority. And the extreme right and the far right together, you can see them pushing now for Europe to actually take another direction, one more in the same line of what Donald Trump and Elon Musk represent, with migration policies that are contrary to international human rights law, with an economic agenda that is based on deregulation, which will hurt workers' rights, environmental standards very harshly, and backing down on the environmental policies. I think so far, I think we are still in a situation of battle between which path actually the EU will be the final decision for the EU and also for the conservative right. So far, they are leaning towards the far right and extreme right. So far, it looks like that is the direction they are taking. But it means that we need to work even harder between the more progressive groups to create as much pressure as possible and to be able also to kind of echo the voices of all the people that see this alternative role for Europe and for the EU and sees that role more important than ever in the geopolitical situation, the international situation that we are facing at the moment with Trump, Elon Musk, and Putin. So I'm an optimist, so that's why I say I think it's still, you know, an ongoing process and a fight, and I think this is absolutely how the left should position itself, that this is the most important job that we have ahead of us in the coming years. And if we walk into the path of this cooperation between the extreme right, the far right, and the conservative right, I think that will turn out to be a historical mistake for Europe and for all of the world.
And what do
small issues?
Yeah, small issues. Okay, how do we do it? So you and some other left parties formed also a new European left party right now. There was a split. I think this is not the big subject which we are tackling here. I'm more interested in what do you think if we come to the practical level. So we told you, you arrived this morning, but we told you also before the left party in Germany is gaining a lot of members, like more than 2,000 people joined every day the party since last week, since all the things were happening in the European Parliament. So those are good news. So we are a lot of people out here, and I think that you are right in many countries who say like, okay, we don't want to go on like this anymore. We don't want to sit there and witness what Trump and Musk and all the others, little Orbans and whoever are doing. So what do we do next?
Well, if you want to see like a silver lining in this global situation, I think that the whole Musk and Trump and Putin, I think it really opens up a space for the left. As I said, I mean, the expectations I kind of sense that people have for Europe, I think there is also a huge space for the left alternatives, for an alternative vision when it comes to Europe, when it comes to our role in the world, and also the kind of founding principles that international politics or European politics should be based on. I think there are probably people that will disagree with me. Like my personal view when it comes to the cooperation between the left in different countries is, I think we have had a tendency to understand cooperation as joint resolutions. So we will end up in rooms with each other for hours and hours until we have decided on, you know, we can agree on every single place where the comma is and the word there and so on. And that's basically, I've been in the left for quite a long time. I think that's basically the way that we have been doing international cooperation for quite a long time. I think we have much more to gain from learning best practices and experiences from each other, like what works in terms of campaigning here, what works in terms of communication there, to just copy the best ideas that we see and then implement them in our national contexts, because there will always be national contexts. That's the problem with the joint resolution way of working. And also through that, try and strive for a left that does not have to agree or disagree on everything, if I would phrase it like this, but works in the same direction together in a pluralistic way. That's at least what I would see as the most important task for us at the moment, also to find these ways of doing cooperation together. And then we have all of these big policy issues that also unite us, where I think we can gain a lot from just knowing the alternatives, the thinking, the theories that are developed in different parties, in different countries, by different leftist actors. When it comes to the digital economy, for example, what is the leftist alternative to these monopolized these tech monopolies, the ways that, you know, the richest men in the world can just transform, which they've always done, but maybe less publicly than now, transform their economic power into political power in an, I would say, unprecedented way in terms of how publicly it's happening at the moment. Or when it comes to the environmental crisis, for example, feminism, all of these issues that really unite us, where I think we also become stronger in just seeing all of these left initiatives when we see them move forward in different ways and in different forms and in different colors on national level. But moving more in that direction in terms of how we work internationally.
Last question from me, and then you can already think about your questions. We also totally forgot to say hello to all the people in the live stream. You also can place questions in the chat, and we have a pad here where we can see them, and I will bring them in. Going back to Finland, so as I said in the beginning, you are facing local elections also there. They are probably not as important as our elections here in 2 weeks, but nevertheless, local elections are always super important. What are the most important issues in the current situation for the people in Finland?
I think the most important issues has to do with the public, the welfare, actually. The social and healthcare sector is in a very bad crisis because of the austerity policies of the government. But it's been in a state of lack of funding for a very long time. And now the government is kind of pushing the regions that are in charge of social and healthcare to do the cuts by cutting funding. And not giving them a chance to kind of take care of their own economy in a reasonable way. So they're kind of forced into this continuous spiral of austerity and cutting, which only makes matters worse. So I think that welfare will be the big topic. And I think once again, what the left will try and do is to make this to a vote of confidence about the government. That this is always about showing the true colors of the far right, and what the far right and the conservative right, what their cooperation means for ordinary people. And for, of course, for all of the people working within the public sector that also bear the burden of austerity policies in their everyday lives. I also have one last reflection, because you did not ask me about this, regarding Finland and the situation in Germany at the moment. I think what the Finnish example also shows is that there is no other way, I think, of combating the far and extreme right than what I would call like a re-stigmatization of the extreme right. So Finland is a very good example of how this normalization process works, that the true Finns have only become more and more extreme, year by year, leader by year, policies by policies, and taking them into government, as maybe you can see the National Coalition Party, the Conservatives, copying their ways of speaking, copying their ideas of what is the problems of society. Maybe someone in the audience can correct me, but I do not know any country from anywhere where this has been a successful strategy to counter the far and extreme right. There are no such examples from any place. There were leftist people saying that, look, now we will see how the Sara Wagenknecht project with a conservative social policy something, that will be a very good way of combating the far right. This is what we all should do. It was not. I think the German example shows that that project strengthened them. What the conservative right wing is doing in Germany at the moment will strengthen them. So there is no kind of other way to walk than backwards in a way to re-stigmatizing these parties, keeping them out of influence, pushing the conservative right wing into not entering into these cooperations with them. And I think that is also, that is what we are trying to do in Finland, that is what we need to do in the European Parliament, also to put pressure on the conservative right wing not to enter into this cooperation that is not only about the far right, but really all of the extreme right, the extremist of the extreme parties there. To make sure that we do not lose the cordon sanitaire or the firewall, as it has been called.
now, because I guess there are so many people having so many questions for you, and we also can enter the discussion. There is the microphone for those who are here. Please give me a sign if you have a question for Lee, if you or a comment. And if you have a question, please also say a little bit who you are and where you're from, because we are like a mixed group from many, many countries, what is very nice. I also have like 2 questions in the chat, but we maybe start with one here. Is there somebody starting? No, not yet. Okay. So, yeah.
So, is it your impression that the
Can you say shortly who you are?
who I am?
Yeah.
So my name is Rita. I'm originally from Portugal, and I've been living in Berlin for 7 years now. My German remains pants, sorry. But I've been living out of Portugal for the last 20 years, so in the UK, in Spain, and now Germany. My question is, so what I see is that, or my perception is that, doesn't mean it's correct, so I would very much like to hear your opinion, is that it looks like this been in the oven on the right-wing side for a long time, and we didn't see it coming. We saw it coming; it was already here. You know, it feels like they mined everything, all the structures around us. I can speak also for my kids. My kids, they say, "Mama, we get all of these noise from TikTok, from social media, and they're grooming kids with fear of migrants, with fear of not having a job, of never buying a house." And this is there. It's that noise that we don't see, but kind of have put us in this situation where we even have normal people or people with values voting for the extreme right. So my question is, how do we counter this? How do we get together to create a similar, using their strategy to our advantage also, you know, going on social media, changing the narrative, but a narrative that is, sexy to the left, that makes people want to make the left great again somehow, you know, use their strategies. I don't know.
Okay, we can also comment that a little bit from Germany, but first it's up on you.
It's a very good question. And referring back to, maybe I was polemic when I was defining how the left uses to work together, like with the resolution writing, and if you don't agree on everything, you can absolutely not work together and so on. How does the extreme right do international cooperation? They don't sit down and do resolutions together. No, so they have kind of managed, I think, in a way to create this pluralistic scene where they don't use that much energy on canceling each other on the topics they don't agree on, or sitting down to agree on every single word. But what they have been managed to do is actually to create this plethora, this pluralistic environment of different voices, but all kind of with a similar narrative, bombing us in these different countries. So when I talk about why I think within the left, we need to connect in a way with each other. We need to know who does what, but we don't need to do the whole sitting down with the resolutions thing in a way. I think we should also try and strive for also creating this pluralistic scene or environment of the different leftist voices and the different leftist projects. But to be able to do that, I think we benefit from knowing the best practices of each other and knowing these different experiences. Coming here is doing that. Taking messages from here into our own home countries, just encouraging people to do their own projects, whether it's a podcast or it's a festival or it's an organization or it's your party, whatever it is, to try and reignite this energy into the left. And I think that's also what has been so nice to see now about Germany, is that I think I can sense this type of energy around the campaign. And that in the best way, when you can get it running, you can try and create this similar kind of plurality of voices with the similar narrative, of course. I mean, we should not forget that the founding principles, the ideology the values, of course, need to be there.
Yeah, I just, because we are asking Lee questions, but I can comment that maybe just a little bit what we see now. So I guess the left is the first time really putting a huge effort into social media. We recognized there are so many young people who want to get engaged, but the ways are different now. Probably when some of us were educated, you thought like, okay, I'm going to my student group or whatever, and then I go to the party group, and then there's a lot of discussion. So I guess what has been visible is that there is a change in how people engage into political processes, but it's going very rapidly. But the challenge will be to keep all that together, because nobody learned, how to deal with those mass organizations. But there are a lot of possibilities, I would say, in the moment. We also recognize the far right. So we, as Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, we have 26 offices worldwide currently, where we are working on topics together with local partners like social ecological transformation, feminism, and all the other stuff which is on the left. And we recognized 10 years ago already that the far right started to travel through the Balkans, through Brazil and everywhere, because and I guess they just went there, shaked hands, and it was a little bit like Lee said, they were not setting up super complicated projects, just talk to each other in Latin America and Europe. How did you do it? What are the most important populist terms? Did they work? And they exchanged it, and they are using it. That's how it seems. Okay, who is going to be next? I would take 2 questions. First you and you together. And please say who you are.
Yes, thank you. I'm Simon. I'm from Berlin. Well, I live in Berlin. I'm from Germany. I'm a union activist. I'm not that familiar with the party lens you have. So my question to you, as a longtime party leader, as a union activist, I want to get rid of capitalism. And I think there's certain limitations as it comes to parties, as in far they can be helpful to us to end capitalism. And I wondered, how did you tackle this? How did you look at it as a party leader? Where did you see the limitations of a party? And how did you embed your view of this in your party work? Like, did you try to build a mass organization of a party? Did you see it just as complementary? Yes, that would be my question.
Hello, everybody. My name is J.P. Väisänen. I'm a Finnish journalist. Thank you, Li Andersson, for a very inspiring speech. You always give them from your heart. And Johanna, thank you for yesterday. You made it possible that I could be there demonstrating against AFD. It's so important not to talk, but also to do something. By my question for dear Li, I think we have been marching on the same peace marches. And now my question is about the peace, security, defense politics on the EU Parliament. What are the next important steps to fight against the militarization? Because the budget seems to go and go and go, and there is a lot of talk about forming a unitarian EU militarization organization. What is the pose of you in this, please?
Okay, good questions. Maybe I start with the last one, because in a way I think the best way to fight militarization is to fight against Putin. He is the one who brought this development upon Europe. That is why I personally and my party support giving arms to Ukraine, because that is why they are doing. They are fighting back against his imperialist project there. I think in terms of Europe, the most crucial questions, I think, if you talk about peace, during the coming years is firstly, it's Ukraine. Will there be a ceasefire? When will it be? Under what type of conditions? How will the EU, what position will we take in terms of what comes for Ukraine after that? For example, in terms of EU membership, which I personally think will be probably an integral part of the future of Ukraine after this phase of the war has ended. Like, how does the left support the forces within Ukraine who are fighting, for example, now at the moment to protect workers' rights and trade union rights against some of the labor reforms of the Ukrainian government? How do we continue to support the forces in Ukraine who fight for social justice there as a part of the work that will be done when there is a ceasefire? So when we talk about peace, I think Ukraine is one important dimension and topic, and I think within the left we should be ready also to discuss the scenarios for what is coming after this acute phase of the war. Other topics that are relevant, I think, has to do with, will we manage to push other issues on the agenda? Because now it looks to me like the European Union, the worst case scenario is that the coming years they will be talking about competitiveness, which they will interpret as just taking, away regulation, this kind of deregulation agenda, and security in its narrow definition, which is just military defense. But security is not just that. Look at the environmental crisis, the implication it already has all around the world, but also in a very concrete way within Europe, where you have people dying from natural disasters caused by climate change. This is already a reality, and we are still not talking about how we adapt to climate change. We are still kind of addressing it as something that is a future thing that we can stop, but it's already here. If we want to talk about security, will we be successful in pushing issues that has to do with welfare and workers' rights and social justice? Because that is the foundation of security. That's like the first piece of the puzzle that has to be there. And then the third dimension, if we talk about peace and Europe in the coming years, I have to say also has to do with our multilateral institutions. I think one of the most dangerous developments at the moment is what we are seeing, this erosion of respect for international law and our multilateral institutions through a very blatant hypocrisy and double standards also of the EU member countries. And I think a very good example is this discussion, I don't know what this discussion has been here, around the ICC arrest warrants. Do you implement them or not? For the EU, that has been very critical of some countries in the global south not condemning the Russian invasion enough, for maybe being unclear about whether they are willing to arrest Putin or not. And then they are not saying that they are willing to implement the other arrest warrants of the same court, the same institution. The end of this development will be a world that is run completely governed by the interests of the biggest countries with the most economic or military power. That will be the only thing that matters in a world where we lose what we have left of these multilateral institutions, what we have left of respect for international human rights law and international law. So I think in terms of peace and security, these topics will also be one of the biggest one in the coming years in Europe. On anti-capitalism and parties, because I have to talk about all my Nordic colleagues, I will also talk about the Danish. The Danish left, they have a chair called Pelle Dragstedt, who has done a book called Nordic Socialism. And one of his main arguments in the book is actually that sometimes he argues, and I agree with his analysis, we have a tendency of making our lives quite complicated for ourselves as leftists. If we address our anti-capitalism as this complete, like we are living in a completely capitalist society now, and then we need to reform it into a complete alternative of anti-capitalism at a point which we never get to. So his argument is that we have features in society that are, features that are anti-capitalist. And he has all of these different examples there. He's talking about cooperatives. He's talking about some of the public sector, some of the state-owned companies. And his argument is that, the road to anti-capitalism, at least from the point of view of people who have chosen party politics, so we have chosen to work in the parliamentary system, we have chosen to work through reforms, is to strengthen the anti-capitalist features of society that actually already exist in different places, and of course also then limit and fight the capitalist features in this same society. And I would say that this fight against the tech monopolies is one of the most important fights that we have ahead of us, because that is capitalism at its worst. And I think for me that have chosen to work in party politics, for me this feels like a reasonable way of working. Because for us who have chosen to do politics within the parliamentary system, for me I have felt frustrated many times during my time in party politics, but I have never once been fooled not to think that the power is in those structures. Like I always say to my MPs, remember that every time we vote, it matters, because the vote will affect the real lives of real people in real ways. So for me, that has been a meaningful way, but I think in terms of creating push for change in society, for that we need other actors as well. So very rarely all new ideas or initiatives are born or formed in the party structures. Usually they come from academia, they come from civil society, they come from activists, from NGOs, from young people, old people, and smart parties find ways to listen and take these initiatives and push for them and push them through the parliamentary system. And that's, for me, is how this interaction between movements and party politics should work when it works at its best.
Okay, we're gonna take one question from the chat now in the live stream. The first one is, how can we block the billionaires from using their money to buy parties? Do you have an idea?
Well, using their money from buying parties actually is easy, because that you can do through laws. I just heard, I guess you have all been following Greenland. Did you know that Greenland is run by a left-wing party? Yes. Good. And Greenland, it is important to talk about Greenland now for several reasons, of course. Just for the first fact that now, Trump is doing his own imperialism there. It's a blatant example of that when he states he threatens to annex Greenland, not ruling out the use of military force. But also because Greenland is a society of, I think, around 50,000 people. So think about what would happen in a society of that size if 5,000 people or 7,000 people started getting certain messages in their social media. Like how easy it actually would be to swing opinions or influence politics in a society of that size. And we already know how Donald Trump sent was it his son-in-law or something? Or something like that? Sent there to his son, yes, to recruit these influencers, which I think is actually quite a scary example of them actually trying to do this. And Greenland, from my understanding, has now passed a law that basically forbids all foreign support, political financial support to parties. This is their response to the threats of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So you can do that type of legislation nationally. You can prevent these rich people, especially from abroad, from buying up parties for their own gain. The bigger problem we have is how do we stop them from buying up the social media platforms that we're using and using them for their political influence. Exactly. Now he's buying TikTok as well. So at least in the US. And there, I think we need to work together actually with forces in the US for them to push also in the US national legislation regarding the monopolies and to try and create a push. I think we need to work within the European Union, so the EU would push for that. It's not enough to regulate. It's not enough to regulate what happens in these monopolies if we do not address the monopoly itself, because that's the problematic power structure. Now, if you look at the digital economy, and so far the responses of EU has only been the rules for how the algorithms can work and so on, but they have actually, to my opinion, not addressed the core issue at stake. And then I know that there's a lot of people who are working on these alternatives for an alternative digital economy for Europe, a business model that could be based on very different fundamentals than these huge monopolies that you see in China and the US. Also by public investment, like starting out with public investment in public digital infrastructure, using that to create digital capabilities here, and then after that moving on to hopefully also create a business environment that would be based on open standards and so on, that it would kind of create a more equalized private surrounding for the digital economy than what we are seeing in the US and China with this huge concentration of data and wealth.
Okay, is there another question here in the room? Yeah, there in the back. Say who you are. And then we take the two together. There's another one here in the middle. He will be next. First there.
Yeah, should I go? Hi, my name's Siobhan. I'm from the UK. And yeah, it's really exciting to hear what the Finnish Left Party are doing and achieving. Because in the UK, we've faced a massive defeat of the left over the last few years. But my question is, because I don't really know anything about the Finnish Left Party, and yeah, I'm wondering, are you very focused on kind of like electoral strategy, like electing kind of like politicians into the government, or are you kind of looking to a broader kind of political project that's looking at base building, maybe through like mutual aid or like community initiatives and like trying to grow a membership base? So I'm thinking maybe a little bit like Belgian Workers' Party. Yeah, thanks.
Two together, yeah, it's your turn.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm Canadian. I actually moved to Berlin from Finland. So, moi. We're here under the banner of how the left can win. And maybe we could think about how the left often loses. We live in a really divided world right now, and I think those are divisions that are perpetuated from both the left and the right. So I guess on a more kind of day-to-day street level, like how do you think about how we can actually reach out to people who we disagree with?
Very good questions. Okay.
No, you can answer.
Okay, I will, because I know that there are Greek colleagues here, and also when you say that the UK has faced terrible defeat of the left, but before that, you had some very amazing successes as well. And I think actually the UK and Greece are both very good examples of when the left gets dangerous, when it's really successful, it will be hit harder than we can imagine, because then you have to make an example of it, you know, for the rest of the leftist movements all over. I don't know if that makes you feel better or not, but you know, I think it's still important to stress that we've also seen some of the most amazing successes in your countries. In terms of the strategy, I think we are not a party. I think democracy in Finland is not very well resourced. So I think we are battling with those issues all the time. That's one of the main issues that we are actually have discussed in the party. That how do we avoid a situation where a party turns into an electoral machine? Because we also have a system where we have elections quite often, every year usually, which means that the party is always in this state of, you know, there is a campaign again, and We also have a personal vote system, which means we always have to recruit candidates and everybody has to do their own campaigns, and it takes a lot of resources. I think what we would want to do is focus even more. We are trying to do it more and more, but focusing more also on base building and growing the membership base. And I think also that is a very good example of where and how on stuff we should learn more from each other about. Like, where are the successful strategies? How have they done it? How could we do that in our own home countries? Reaching out to people that we disagree with. You know, I feel like I feel like I do it every day in a way. I think that also comes from being in party politics, but I think I personally, like, my agenda has usually been, of course, I draw the line with the fascists and so on, but I usually go to all the weird events I have been asked to, even if they are, you know, arranged by the Confederation of Enterprises and the employers or the National Coalition Party.
Where you don't know exactly
I'm not counting you into the weird guys. I've been to much weirder events than this, I can tell you. Because I feel like as long as they are not like ideologically, like really in a fundamental way, actors I want to have nothing to do with, I do feel that there is a point in going into the debates and the places and the structure in as many places as possible with your left voice and your alternatives, because that's also a way, I think, of normalizing us in environments where we are usually not seen or heard. I know the US, they had a huge debate around should the Democrats have gone to that or that podcast and so on. I think usually it is a good idea. I think Bernie Sanders did that, right? You know, go there, use that platform, that space for your own message. Of course, as long as you don't kind of cross the line of the fascists and so on. So that's usually how I have worked. And I do think it's a good way. I also always tell my MPs that every time a women's magazine wants to interview you, you always say yes. It's a very important forum to be a leftist in, because we are usually not seen or heard in those places. So it's in a way, I think, a way of making us, I don't know, more normal is a trouble way to phrase it, but more seen, more heard. For the big majority, and that doesn't make us any less leftist or alternatives any less radical. It's just using places to present them, to find new audiences that might not be the ones that find us on the social media or in their own networks.
Okay, I know that there was another question here, but I first take also one from the chat, because there are 50 people as well in the live stream. So there's a question. It says, how can we mend the gap between men and women regarding ideological standpoints? I mean, this means that we all have to agree that women and men do have a gap on ideological standpoints. For also keeping you awake, who thinks that this is a truth? You just say, like, is it the truth that there's a gap?
That there is a gap.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. Who's against? Okay. Okay, so more people think that the question is right. And we might put it together with another question which was just coming in. There is Iris from Finland. Could we be even braver in offering a comprehensive vision for an economically and socially just future? We may lose votes in short term, but slowly if we don't do that fast.
Say the end again.
And we might lose votes if we don't, succeed with this fast.
Maybe I start with the second question again. I think you can see actually right now in Finland, you can see this development where I think the social democracy is going right-wing, or more and more to the right, as a kind of their reaction to this general shift to the right in society. My analysis has been that to prevent that from happening, I think we need to kind of be a part of creating a progressive space that also allows us for presenting the more radical visions when it comes to labor market policy or economic policy. There needs to be places and spaces for them to be presented that is not, a press conference of the party leader of, the electoral platform, because that's usually not the best way to present a new, very radical idea. So it usually starts somewhere else, and you develop them. And then when I was talking about this interconnection between the movements and the parties, I think they also have a tendency then to find their way into the more general kind of political dialogue and discourse. So one of my projects at home now that I was elected an MEP has been to use the communications money as an MEP for this new political festival that will be an annual thing where we are trying to create this progressive space. So get the Social Democrats there to talk about shortening working hours, take the Greens there to talk about universal basic income, take all the leftist people and some great international guests to talk about anti-capitalism, to make sure that we have places where we can meet and discuss radical policy proposals. And also make sure that, for me at least, it's been important that it's not just for the left party, that we cannot be kind of envious of that agenda, but it actually benefits us if we can get people in these other parties to want to talk about these same more radical progressive policies, because then it will make it easier for us to campaign for it. So that has been one way that we have been working. What was the first question? It wasn't the men and women.
The one was the feminist one.
Yeah, so as far as I know, there's research globally actually on the stronger growing gap in values between young women and young men, specifically, I think, for younger generation, where it's pronounced. And it's interesting because it's not just Europe, it's also like South Korea, for example, it's like all over, where you can see young men turning more right and conservative and young women more left, value liberal and so on. I think it is a challenge. Now I'm talking more from like a party perspective. Because I think in the name of pluralism and gender equality, I feel like that kind of gender gap would be problematic for my party as well, because we do want to represent the broad scope of society, not just certain specific groups. So if the left is to have some kind of cultural project of its own, I would specifically maybe think about how we can make more visible the male voices within the left, or the ones who are doing the social media in a successful way, to also show that, being a leftist is that you can. It's not just for women, or it's not feminine. I don't know if I phrase myself correctly in this way, but really show that there is this plurality of voices and people within the left. Because feminists we always say that representation matters. That's what feminists have always said. That's why we are pushing for female representation. So I don't think it's fair to the men if we don't then say to them that it doesn't matter with their representation, right? So I do think it is a problem, and it is something that we should work on.
Hey, there was a question here in the room. Can you say who you are? And also, are there more questions here in the room? I'm going to collect them. We have like 2 or 3 more. We will take them, but first you are.
Hi. Hi, my name's Aaron. I'm from the United States. You said earlier in your, as you were discussing, that the far right is good at pluralism, finding points of unity, and avoiding maybe some unnecessary infighting. I think you kind of indicated that perhaps the Finnish left did learn from this, and then you also said that there was a unified stance around Palestine, actually, on the Finnish left. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you all came to this unified stance, and maybe, if you like, what you think Germany can learn in this regard?
Just, I guess, one more question from here. Yeah, You first, and you others have to give me signs again. Okay.
Yeah, hey, I'm Kati, I'm from Berlin, and yeah, thank you for your insights. I have a pretty concrete question, talking deregulation and especially fighting big companies. I'm pretty concerned what's going on right now in the EU, especially when you're looking at the omnibus. And I'm thinking, like, for everyone, just omnibus is right now going on in the EU, like they're thinking about deregulation of big directives that are about corporate responsibility. So I'm concerned, what is the left parties doing right now to combat these omnibuses, like the whole thing? I think it wasn't the revolution, but it was a big step for worker rights and living wages, especially in the global south. And now I'm like a bit frustrated what is going on there, and what are your strategies? And
yeah, so this is a really timely question, because the Commission is presenting its work program next week. And I really think the discussion around deregulation will be ignited through that, because we are starting to mobilize now against this deregulation agenda. And I think the first step is actually to tell it for what it really is. Because what they have been saying now is, it's only simplification of rules. It's simplification of regulation. We should not make life difficult for anyone, and we have all this bureaucracy. But now we're actually seeing that it's not. They are lowering standards. They already started with the deforestation regulation, and now they are moving on to other important legal initiatives, such as the corporate responsibility law from the last mandate. So they're opening it up. They're doing it to lower standards, and they are not stopping there. Imagine that in a situation where we are really seeing what these tech monopolies means for democracy, what kind of risks and threats are connected to that kind of concentration of power, of economic power. The EU's response is to create our own monopolies, bigger firms. So what is actually a part of the competitive agenda of this Commission is to change the rules for mergers to enable the birth of bigger companies in Europe. And I think this is, if you would be like a classic right-wing liberal, why would you subscribe to this kind of an agenda? It's like the antithesis of this classical, market economy. So they are planning on changing the rules for mergers to enable bigger corporate units and bigger companies in Europe, even stating clearly that it might mean higher prices for ordinary consumers. Because that's basically then what easily happens if you have less competition in a sector. And in addition to that, they also have this plan on a 28th regime. Nobody really knows if this is feasible or not, but it's stated in their programs that at the moment, they say that it's very difficult for companies when you have 27 different regulatory regimes in the different member states. So let's create a 28th one, so that companies acting in the European Union would have kind of a harmonized set of labor standards and taxation. Does this sound like a really good idea from the point of view of labor rights or taxation? I don't think so. So it's pretty clear that what they are aiming at would actually be like a race to the bottom on a European scale. So fighting this, politicizing this, I guess one challenge for being in the European Parliament is always how to get people informed of what is going on. So I think this is the next big fight that we are going to have, is about making sure that people know what the deregulation agenda actually means. It's a threat to environmental standards, to labor standards, and it even means not fighting monopolies, but creating European versions of them. On Palestine, I think I will not be giving advice to my German friends, because the historical context and national context are different. So I do think that each parties and political movements need to work it out themselves. I think in Finland this has not been a real problem, I think, for us. I mean, it might also be Finland is a country that has had an extremely restrictive migration policy for a long time. I think in a way, sometimes it also shows in our internal debates. In terms of, if I compare to Denmark, for example, there's a lot of internal tension within the society, also around the topic regarding Palestine. But I don't kind of see that same type of tension in Finland. So within the left, I think it has not been a problem to form a position where we have been pushing the Finnish government, to stop all arms trade with Israel, because the current right-wing government is buying arms, so they're financing the genocide in Gaza. Also, a firm position in defense of international law, because there are so many arguments. I don't think you need to say anything else than the international law argument when we talk about Palestine. We have an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice from last summer, stating that the occupation of the West Bank, of Gaza, that it's contrary to international law, the occupation in itself, because their legal argument is when they go through very specifically the praxis that is enacted in the occupied areas, the longevity of the occupation, the use of natural resources, and so on. And the kind of legal conclusion that they make is that this is actually de facto an annexation of land, not an occupation, or that's how they phrase their legal argument. And that is why the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion states that the occupation itself is contrary to international law. So you don't have to go any further than the international law argument, actually, to say that, even the Court of Justice says that Israel needs to end the occupation of these territories. They need to respect international humanitarian law in Gaza, and so on. So for us, we have built our position on these arguments because there's a lot to support us when talking about this topic, even from a strictly legal point of view.
Okay, we are going to take the last questions now here, the last round from the room. You were first, then, yeah, here we're gonna go here, and then there's another one. Okay, so 5 is a lot, so please make sure that they are short. Yeah, okay, here. Okay, we're gonna close now. Yeah, but you start.
Hi, my name is Lilka. I'm from Finland, and now I'm here primarily working as an activist in the Palestine Solidarity Movement. But I wanted to ask, you've sort of touched on this a bit, but I wanted to ask, how can the leftist parties make changes that are concretely revolutionary and not reformatory only, so we don't get stuck in this loop of elections that feel like they are the last election before fascism?
Okay, then there were like 2 questions here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jurgis from Lithuania. I'm also labor union lawyer. We will meet afterward. I wanted to ask, as the US is with the Trump and so on, do you see possibilities of Europe finding other foreign policy allies? I know it's some sort of discussions there, but what's your personal take on that?
Okay, and then there was a person, it's hard to see from here, yeah?
Hi, I'm Almut from Berlin, and my question would be, whenever I walk through Berlin, I see a lot of stickers saying "fuck AfD" and so on, and I always think, okay, why as a lefty we should always refer to someone or to a party that's right, and why don't we have our own slogans? So when you said you want to unify the lefties, what could it be? A personal question for you, like the slogan that could unify the left, because for the nationalism it's so easy, so what could it be that we have all in common and we could actually fight for?
Okay, then I saw 2 questions here. Is it okay? Can you get them together? Okay, there was one here by Janis, and you were also having a question? Okay, first Janis.
So, hi, good evening. Yanis Bournos, former MP from Greece, currently the Vice President of the European Left. First of all, Lee, I'm very happy to hear your valuable insights. Just a response to a comrade that asked before about how we can approach people who don't vote for us. My answer would be find or hire a very good data analyst, because everything is quantifiable, and nowadays elections, as the far right has showed us very clearly, are won or lost through a very good or a very bad or lack of data analysis. So keep that in mind as well, apart from the political discussion. So Lee, European elections are not comparable to national elections in terms of political analysis. They're a different category of ballot box. So I want to ask you very concretely two things having to do with the European elections and the next national elections in 2027, taking in mind that the electoral behavior in the Nordic countries are much more stable in comparison to us in the European South, for example, or other countries. Name number one reason for the electoral explosion of Vasemistolisno to 17%. Number one, which is the main reason for this outstanding result, among others, but the most important one. And on the way to 2027, what is the strategy to build on this outstanding performance in terms of improving the relation of forces in Finland? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was there a last question there?
Okay, my questions were the left, which strategies do you have? Thank you for this good congress here. Which strategies does the left have for the weaponizing of the rights movements of former workers? Like they evoke the fear of sharing our richness in the EU, and cause the lack of empathy, increasing lack of empathy of the people here and everywhere, and the neo-colonialism using mostly EU but also different workforces which have less rights and are being like modern slavery. These are my questions. Thank you.
Big mixture of things.
Yes. On reforms, sorry. Yeah.
And my name is Antonius likewise, and I'm doing social activism, art, and LGBTI rights.
Okay, thank you.
So on reforms and revolutions, as I said earlier, like I'm that part of the left that I need both personally. Like I'm not a very how do you say? I could not stand just wait for the huge revolution to come. I need stuff to happen also before that and on the way to it. So for me, the way to work, I guess, is to both create, develop the progressive spaces for the revolutionary new ideas and policy proposals, and the creating them, developing them together, and of thinking about what does a more reformist program look like that takes us in the right direction. When we were in government, we used to have these meetings with our ministerial group, where we were talking about something I call transformative policy, because we had this analysis that if we only, when we are in power, if we only focus on getting, more money into one place, it will be very easy to take away everything we have achieved. Because then they just cut, that place in the budget, so you get 100 million and then it's out 4 years later. So what we were trying to push us to think about what are like the leftist structural reforms that, you know, will be hard to take away. That they change structures in society like in a permanent way. Because I think when you are working more in the reformative part of politics, I think that's how you bring the revolution with you, in a way. So one of the reforms we did, for example, was a big reform in the upper secondary education system, which we had a weird system in Finland where it wasn't actually free for the students. So all the study materials were, you had to pay for them yourself. I still, like to this day, almost every week, I get messages from young people who thank me for the big reform of the upper secondary education, which made it completely free of charge for them. I get thank you emails from mothers who say that, you know, previously they actually their children could not go into the general upper secondary school because it was too expensive. So for some, it's maybe, you know, a little reformist policy. For me, it was kind of bringing the revolution with me because they haven't taken it away. I think it would be so unpopular that not even the right-wing coalition government has done it. We did a reform of the maternity leave system, which is now working very well in terms of like a very steep increase of men using their parental leave to be with small children. That's also an example of this like more structural reform that's harder to take away. And then we also did not manage very well in some areas to actually think of transformative policy from a leftist point of view, things that would be hard to take away. So for me, this has been a good way of thinking that when you are in power, how can you make sure that what you actually do is transformative in a permanent way. Foreign policy allies for Europe. If you ask me as a leftist, I do not think the EU leadership thinks like this. If you ask me as a leftist, I think one of the most pressing issues actually now that is connected to the very dangerous development we're seeing regarding the multilateral institutions has to do with bridging the divide between the global north and global south. Because that is one consequence of what is happening in Gaza. That is one consequence of the hypocrisy and double standards of many of the Western countries, is that there is I would say, growing divide between the global north and the global south that Donald Trump is doing his best to strengthen as much as possible. I don't know, I just saw the tweet by Rubio on how the G20 is now woke. He will not go to South Africa because they want to discuss issues such as social justice in the G20 meetings. I mean, think about what a middle finger that is to a country that's very influential power player in the global south. So from a leftist point of view, I think that, you know, foreign policy allies, that we should work to bridge this divide. Our own slogans, this is really difficult. I'm very bad at that kind of stuff. And I'm very sorry I'm going to say this because I know there's people from the UK here. But I have always been very inspired by the Take Back Control slogan. I think it's a really good one because it talks to you. It's like in a firm, like emotional way. It makes you feel something. And I think also from a leftist point of view, I think it actually points to a lot of the stuff that we should be working on in the coming years, like fighting the tech monopolies, protecting the welfare state, fighting the deregulation agenda. I mean, anti-capitalism is about defending democracy. I mean, democracy is the opposite of capitalism in my view, because capitalism is power of the few. It is exactly what we're seeing in the digital economy, and the antithesis to that is democracy, something that we can all decide on and have a say in. So my answer to this is take back control. Sorry, the UK people, for this. There are probably better options. And I think that also actually when you said about how the far right capitalizes on people's lack of hope for the future, because that is why what they have been telling us now all since the financial crisis, that there is no better days coming. It's going to all be austerity until we die. And I think many people feel like the left has nice ideas, but they don't believe in them. They don't believe that they're actually, that we can enact them. So I think taking back control of economic institutions, of the whole economic system, I mean, I think that is also a way to make our alternatives more viable and credible in a way. That if we want, and we should always be the force that try and create hope for the future, to understand that for us to be able to do our politics, we also need to win the battle for democracy that is ongoing in the, if you look at the economic system now. And Yanis, how do we build on the EP elections? And the strategy, the one reason, I think I know what you want me to answer on the one reason, but I do think that the one most important reason was this vote against the government policies of Finland and people understanding the link to Europe. That is my honest answer to you. And I think that's also what we are building on now, to mobilize, to keep mobilizing people against the government policies and try to avoid a situation, because when people get their, when their monthly income gets cut and you're worried about your economy or you lose your job, it's very easy also that what happens in society is not this, especially in the Nordics, but we are not as exuberant maybe, or fiery as some in some other countries when it comes to politics. So we're not out in the streets all the time, but I mean, the worst thing that can happen is apathy. That people, they do not get energized. They do not get energized by the austerity policies, but they get demoralized and into a state of apathy. So I think coming into the parliamentary election in 27 in Finland, I feel it's really important to keep up the energy in terms of mobilizing people against the government. And the second thing that is strategically important is to try and create a pressure on the Social Democrats not to move further right. Because if they do that, what it will mean for Finland is that we will not have a progressive alternative to these government policies, but you will probably end up with a social democratically led government with the participation of the Conservatives. So a red-blue coalition. So that I think for Finland is one of the most important strategic goals now going into 27.
Thank you, Lee. So, of course, I have a last question. So, what is your wish for the German left?
I'm going to say, like, keep up the good work in a way, but I really have to say that why it feels important to be here is what I said in the start. I know that there are a lot of political forces watching Germany. There are political forces in the extreme right watching Germany, but there are also political forces in the left watching Germany. There are conservative right-wing parties watching Germany. So I feel that it's important for the left, broadly, globally, to see a good result for you and a not so good result for the other project I referred to earlier. That's also followed by some people within the broad left scene. And I do hope, for the sake of Europe, that the firewall, I don't know if you feel like it's come down already with the vote in the Bundestag or not. But there, as I will state once again, there are no examples from anywhere of that being a good strategy to combat the extreme right. So I think keeping up with that message towards the conservative is extremely important.
So thanks a lot, Lee, for coming, for supporting us here, for having this very honest and I also would say like very deep debate in some parts. We all can stay here a bit, so use the chance to talk to each other, because that's the most important thing what the left can do, and build something out of it. Thank you.